Hey guys, so I wasn't planning on uploading this video, but it has been requested by a lot of people, so I decided upon your request I'm going to create this video, talk about the timelines and the time travel when it comes to Avengers Endgame and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5. Is it really different? Is it all that different anyway? Is this a separate timeline on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Was it caused by the fact that they saved the planet, stopped Graviton and whatnot? Or could it possibly be that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is just ignoring the snap for other reasons, like fear of spoiling Endgame, being ordered not to use the snap on this season, in order not to reveal how things are fixed on Avengers Endgame, or when things are fixed to be more precise? Now, first and foremost, I'm assuming most of you, if not all of you, have already watched Avengers Endgame. It's been almost a month, and I'm assuming even though some of you are gonna decide to complain in the comments about the title of this video, that it should be okay. I mean, the spoiler ban put forth by the Russo brothers is quite over. But hopefully, though we're all grown-ups over here, we're not gonna complain about the obvious, but in all cases, spoiler alert, cause this video is gonna be Avengers Endgame heavy. Now, first and foremost, I don't think the time travel on Avengers Endgame versus Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is really different. I think it's pretty much the same, and I think both productions have basically subscribed to the same ideas when it comes to time travel. But here are the facts. The team travels at the beginning of Season 5 to Point L on this timeline. Now, Point L is 2091. They make it to the future the short way, Fitz follows them the long way, and that's why we got another version of Fitz, because that Fitz traveled in his own timeline, lived that kind of past. That Fitz, the one that died at the end of Season 5, was basically an anomaly in that new timeline. The same does apply to Deke, by the way, because Deke lived that timeline. He was part of that timeline, a coherent part of that timeline. So whether or not Fitz would have died at the end of Season 5, we would have ended up with two versions of Fitz. The version from the original timeline and the version from this newly created timeline. However, though, for the agents, it's a little bit different. The rest of the agents, that is. They travel to the future, the short way, they do it through a monolith, so it is pretty similar to what was going on Avengers Endgame. The team traveled through the quantum realm, this team traveled through the monolith. So they're picked up at point E, the agents that is, and that's in 2017, they make it back in early 2018 at point F, and they basically either save the world at point H or fail to do so. So if they fail to do so, then we're going towards a destroyed timeline, a destroyed planet that is, and we're going to point L, and if they succeed at doing so, we're going towards a point M, and point M is basically a fixed timeline where that version of the broken Earth, with Flint, Cassius, and Tess does not exist anymore. Now, one thing that we need to consider over here is it is impossible to consider that this new timeline is the timeline in which Thanos was pulled out of the timeline, on Avengers Endgame, brought to the future, and basically snapped out of existence by Tony Stark, because we know that he existed, he started his mission close to the end of Season 5. So in any given Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. timeline, Thanos did exist in 2018, and he was already invading. There was the battle that happened on the ground, the one that was mentioned on an earlier episode then, there was the part on the news, and there was of course the part in Wakanda. But the part in Wakanda, the snap itself, that would not have happened the way it happened if Graviton were not to be defeated, because by the time it happened, the Earth would have already been shattered. So that's basically nonsensical. So the only way for the events of Avengers Infinity War, the ending of Avengers Infinity War, and the only way for the events of Avengers Endgame to happen is via the team, the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, defeating Graviton in the first place. A wrecked planet prior to the snap will not give Thanos the ability to snap his fingers the way he did at the end of Infinity War, and will definitely not give us a 2023 the way we saw it on Avengers Endgame, the way we watched it there, because there wouldn't be an intact Earth for them to basically live on. There would be the lighthouse and that's it. So yeah, points I and K, the Thanos snap and the 2023 Avengers bringing everyone back. These two need to have happened on a new timeline and not in the 2091 Broken Earth timeline. Now, I cannot emphasize this following point enough because I know I'm going to be getting a lot of comments, so I'm going to repeat myself here at the risk of being a little bit boring. The version of Fitz that died at the end of Season 5 lived through all of it, so he belongs in that timeline. He traveled to his future because, yeah, he lived through all of it as I just mentioned, but then the rest of the team, they didn't really travel to their future. They kind of traveled to a future. The same rules do apply, by the way. When Captain America traveled to 1940, lived with Peggy Carter happily ever after, and then made it back in 2023, That's basically all about him creating a branching in the timeline. So if you travel to an existing point in the past or an existing point in the future, that point and the repercussions at that point and the creation of that point anyway is set in stone, and anything you would do prior to that point basically creates a branching in the timeline because that original point does exist. It is, after all, an integral point in its own timeline, and it is, after all, the point that prompted you to create the changes in the timeline. So from an Avengers Endgame perspective, their travel to points B, C, and D, 2012 the Avengers movie events, 2013 the Thor the Dark World events, and 2014 the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 events, with Natasha and Clint going their own way as well to secure the Soul Stone at that moment. All of that created branchings in the timeline, or possibly created branchings in the timeline, but in the end, the main timeline, the main Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline, remained intact. In other words, the main timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point in time ends at point M and not at point L, because point L can never apply to the timeline that we did watch on Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. I'm sorry, once again I'm trying to explain this in different ways, but I'm trying to make sure that this is 100% clear before I move on, and in such a way that we could head into the discussions right away. But alright though, that brings us to the major question. So what is going on with Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 6? What's happening there? Why aren't we seeing the impact of a snap? So I'm thinking over here there are multiple possibilities. Possibility number one is that they didn't know about what's gonna go down in the movie. They never knew anything about it, so they had to play it safe, which is a possibility. That means that Kevin Feige and the movie side did not tell them about it. But there's also the possibility that there are multiple ways to have fixed the Earth or saved the Earth, stopped Graviton, even though in all cases they would have stopped them in such a way that the events of Avengers Endgame would have happened. But the way they decided to use, the way it all happened on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5, on the finale to be more precise, that's basically the change that they made over there. They were supposed to save it one way, but they saved it a completely different way. Now that would lead us to a new timeline, a timeline with point O where things happen differently. Probably the Battle of Wakanda happened differently, and there has been no point I, no snap, and there has been no point K, no Avengers Endgame events. But that timeline, that new branching, would still lead into point O, which is pretty much the equivalent of point M, a 2091 without a shattered Earth. So yeah, point J and point P on these two timelines kind of represent the beginning of Season 6 of the series, depending on the scenario. Is it scenario number 1, are we in the same timeline? The fact that we're not seeing the snap is all due to politics, and we're gonna make up for that on Season 7, that would be point J. Or are we dealing with a new timeline, a branched timeline due to the events at the end of Season 5, one that has nothing to do with the events of Avengers Endgame, one that's out of the realm of the main Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline, and that would be point P. In all cases, and to answer all the questions and to make a long story short, this is not the timeline in which Loki escaped, the events on Avengers Endgame when they traveled to 2012, because that created a new branching in the timeline prior to everything that we've watched so far. So no, that's not it. That's not any time that branched in the movie prior to 2018, because that wouldn't make any kind of sense applying the rules of time travel from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and from Avengers Endgame. To cut a long story short as well, this is not the timeline created by pulling Thanos into the future from that other timeline, a timeline where he no longer exists, because once again, the point in the timeline where they hear about Thanos, on last season, that's set in stone. So that other thing is completely and totally different. Finally, and this is something I've already mentioned, but this is more towards summing up what I've said on this video, this is not a timeline created just for the mere reason that they fixed the planet or saved the planet, because with Graviton shattering the planet without that fixing of the planet or saving of the planet, we wouldn't have a snap the way we had it on Avengers Infinity War, and we wouldn't have the events of Endgame. Now once again, sorry for repeating myself a couple of times here and a couple of times there, but I was trying to make sure that this is 100% clear, that I'm delivering the message. As you all know, I try to respond to each and every comment, so it kind of makes it harder when we're running around in circles trying to explain once again everything that was said on the video. And this one in specific is, I think, a little bit of a complicated issue. But I'm hoping I've got all my points through for you to start making your arguments against what I'm saying over here, if there are arguments against it. But in all cases, you can let me know what you think of what I've presented here. My thoughts on time travel and timelines on both Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Avengers Endgame within the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general. But you can let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it a much appreciated like, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, be it an Avengers Endgame video, a Marvel video in general, or an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. video, thank you so much for tuning in into this timeline and time travel breakdown video, and have a great day.